introduce our speaker for this evening. I was chosen to introduce Professor Mackey because for the past, I guess, 4 or 5 years, maybe longer, time goes by real quick. I have been traveling with him kind of and documenting much of what he has been disseminating. And this week, a couple of weeks ago, we started to edit out those 8 years, looking at those tapes, trying to put them in some kind of chronological order. And I've spent hours and hours looking at the material that he has been giving us over the years. And I was saying to him that I am more than amazed at the wealth of information. Almost, if you would take it over the 8 years chronologically, he has given us an overview of history, world history, that is profound. And we will be forever grateful. I'm just glad we've been able to catch a lot of it on broadcast quality, so we will have it, we'll be able to keep it in the archives. But I'm grateful to him, and there are a lot of people who are Dr. Finn, Dr. Clark, all of them who have dedicated their lives to disseminating and researching and teaching us history. And it is at this particular time, as the bones downtown in lower Manhattan begin to emerge and speak to us, that we can look at history afresh and anew with Dr. Jeffries. And all of this is speaking to us in a spiritual, dynamic way. And one of those persons over the years who have been doing the kind of research, this man walks around like Dr. Jeffries, with tons of books all the time that he calls his weapons. Because anything he says, he will pick up a book and show it to you. It's been documented. And Dr. Jeffries himself has said that a lot of the information that he has gotten, the research has been done by Dr. Mackey. So again, we are more than pleased, more than happy to be in the presence of this great guru of our times, to touch and feel him. So let's welcome him.
All right. Thank you. How y'all doing? Anytime that Minister Brown or somebody does something like that, I start checking my wallet and my pocketbook, but then I remember, since I'm a poor girl, I don't have no money anyway, so it must have been sincere. But again, I want to thank you, and hopefully we've come together this evening for some kind of enlightenment. I do have some information to give you. I just spoke to Dr. Jeffries outside. He's going to come back. And one of the things I spoke to him about, because in this time of our struggle, we don't have no time for secrets. First of all, we ain't got none know-how, but we only think we got some. But one of the things that people have been calling me about in Brooklyn and other places is finding out just what is the status of the legal suit, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I informed him that I think it would be in the interest of all here that he would come in tonight after the lecture and at least give you a 4 or 5 minutes overview of what the status is, so we don't have to be listening to rumors and all the rest of this garbage, et cetera, et cetera. So he did say that he would come back at the end, but knowing Leonard Jeffries Jr., I may have to go drag him and kicking and screaming back here, but don't nobody leave here until he comes back, because it is important that we understand what the situation is. As a result of what had happened Friday, the other thing I want to thank Sister Kiefer and Brother Jones for having me as a part of that great home gathering on Friday evening where the Gullah folks sort of got together and the money that was raised. And I would like, Brother Jones, if you would please give the people some sense of how much that was taken to help the brothers down home, because these are the things we're going to have to do. And it was absolutely something that did not have to be done, but we got to do it. It ain't going to do it for us. So you don't have to say in figures, but I just would like them to know that it was a success, if you, in your own inimitable way.
Yes, it was a tremendous success, and they raised.
Now, the reason I asked Brother Jones to do that, because y'all know me, see, I really don't have but one lecture. So I fool folks like that. I just have imaginative ways of getting around other things, but I really don't have but one lecture. And I'll keep having that one lecture until either we're liberated or we ain't here no more. The first thing we had better understand, and this is exactly why I mentioned Brother Zone and Jones, what we can do when we try. If we are committed, we can do anything. If you don't believe it, watch how European folks deal with us. Think about it. Watch how they deal with us. You don't really understand the dynamics of your strength. Now, when I say you, I don't mean me outside, but I'm saying this in the editorial sense. And we need to, I think, in our lectures and when these things happen, we need to say, this is what we're doing. Why do I ask this? Because too often we've been programmed to put each other down. Well, it ain't going to work. Ain't no point in me doing that because they ain't going to do that and ain't nothing going to happen and nobody going to get nothing no how. And then when it works, then we don't even know how to say thanks because we're embarrassed. And we had better learn to say thanks because we are a beautiful people. And all we need to do, if you don't think that we're beautiful and that we have a lot of power, just watch how the oppressors treat us. I would like to tie up a lot of things in here tonight because I was handed this paper by Mr. Earl Caldwell, the Daily News, from November 27th, the day that Haiti saved the U.S. resolution. And I take this as a starting point because it seems that so often, but that's part of us too. it seems that so often we tend to forget who we owe and who we don't owe. 2 days ago, a gentleman who is one of the people at the think tanks in the Brookings Institution made the statement on a program called On the Line on National Public Radio when the question came up about the conditions of our Haitian brothers and sisters being turned back on the high seas, what he thought of this, and this is what he said. He said, there's no doubt in my mind that we will be occupying Haiti before the year's out. You hear that? There's no doubt in my mind we'll be occupying Haiti before the year's out, and we've got to put into place now this plan that this time when we go in, we will not leave until the kind of government that we want is in place. Don't call me no liar because I taped them things. That was 3 days ago. What is he saying? What are they saying? Right. Now, remember this man's a historian, he says. He's a member of a think tank. He doesn't even know the history of this country and Haiti. He doesn't obviously not know that we've been kicking Haiti in the behind ever since it has come into being. And the ignorance of our people, as I have experienced it, is 10 times worse than that man. At least most of us do not pretend to be historians. But we have a serious job in front of us. And I'd like to point out to you, if you will, some of the things when we talked about Friday. That was one aspect of it, of reclaiming heritage, the Penn School, of grabbing it and taking advantage of it, of trying to save land in terms of the Sea Island. One of the things that came to me clearly on Friday evening is that it seemed that we're going to have to relearn how to be farmers again. Brother Jones and I was talking about that this morning. That we sit and we talk about running the world and getting this under control, but we don't understand, or too many of us doesn't understand, the importance of land. And it ain't something you just look at. It's something first you got to have some, and secondly, when you get it, you've got to learn how to deal with it. usefully. And we could use no better model than the model out of which our African ancestors came, where land was owned in common by the community. When a couple got married, a certain amount of land was handed aside for you to farm and raise your family, etc., etc. If the family or anything died, the land reverted back to who? Back to the community. We have gotten caught out here in this greedy capitalist system which tells you that the way to live is to chew your brother or your sister's head off, and you owe them nothing. One of the problems I find that we have as a people is that that does not work for us. And when we try it, it messes us up. Just had an example, Exhibit A. Young, obviously Asian lady comes in here, and she's sitting over there crying and going to, we don't know what happened, but she was sitting over there crying and whatnot, and not going, now this supposed to be, child's supposed to be retarded. Don't kid yourself. They know where to go to get sympathy. No, I'm dead serious about this. Now, she could have walked by 50 white churches. Would she have gone in any of them? Would she have gone in any of them? No. The instinct, and as soon as she walked in the door, she's sitting crying, at least 5 people, what's the matter? Can I help y'all? This, that, and the other, right? She sat there, she sharp, and she whatnot, because that is us. And when we lose that, we're in trouble. Y'all hear what I tell you? We're in trouble. It don't work for us. This business of rugged individualism, it will kill us. It will kill us. We have picked up some very bad habits in these northern urban environments, y'all. I have to tell it like it is. We have picked up some very bad habits. Except for people small like yourselves who come in and listen and want to learn, we have people outside who really believe that all you've got to do is to be nice, go get yourself an education, get yourself 3 or 4 of them Pile High and D's, PhDs, whatever you call them, and get a job in the corporate sector. And if you play your cards right, in 10 years you work your way up and you are now sitting at the top. A lot of us even refuse to see see the glass ceiling even when it's opaque. It ain't there. Bam! Over and over again. If we would look at our history, what we would see, it would be clearly understood to us. It couldn't be any other way. How do you get along with somebody who fears you when they got 50,000 machine guns pointed at you, 3 Uzis, helicopter gunships circling over you all the time? Just check our neighborhoods when you have a parade, right? All of this awesome firepower. And here come Moses and Mosetta with their hand in the pocket, and they're scared. Let me give you an example. In 1881, at the U.S. Military Academy, upstate West Point, and I'm always marvel at how we can do these crazy things, why people get upset with us. In 1881, 16 years after the end of slavery, we had already put 4 people in West Point. Y'all know that? 4 people in West Point. Not to say 4 people. All 4 of them had gotten grown as slaves. Now, what would you think if you was doing everything you could to do me under, and here comes a dude, walks in and gets into West Point and passed with all colors? Now, here you sit. You got 1,200 cadets. 1,200. And you got 1 black cadet. The 1,200 is so threatened. Watch you guys, so threatened, so afraid of this 1 cadet that they say, we got to ostracize this nigga. Don't speak to him outside of duty hours. Don't eat with him. Don't play nothing with him. Don't sleep with him. Now you tell me What kind of mind is it? You got everything in the world. I'm just there by myself. And you're afraid of me. In order for these 4 men to have gotten there, no question that they had to be outstanding. They had to have excelled, right? Because otherwise they never would have gotten there. I'm sure their mama said to them, hey, son, going out there and do it. And they boned up all night and he got into West Point. And the man says, nigga, you ain't got no business here because I'm scared of you. One of us equals 1,200 of them. That's something y'all need to think about. You know, we need to understand, because if we could begin to understand this, first we would understand, I argue, the nature of the fear and the why. It would also tell us something else, that there ain't no way in hell that you're ever going to be able to come to any kind of a modus vivendi accommodation with these people. Cannot. They're not programmed for it. The culture is not there. If you can show me logically why 1,200 people have to be afraid of one, something's got to be wrong. Let's take a look at Haiti. Because again, there are lessons there for us. Same as in Penn Central, Sea Island, because all of these things tell us. Why are the Haitians being kicked in the teeth? Same reason. The Western powers, particularly the United States of America, who is now the leader of that world, has never forgiven our brothers and sisters on that island for kicking the biggest and the baddest troops that Napoleon had in the butt. We need to understand that. Go back to 1792. Look at that and see if it has lessons for us. Because here you have a situation where a bunch of slaves on an island isolated, surrounded by nothing but enemies in the middle of slavocracy, 180 miles east is the largest slavocracy in this hemisphere, the United States of America. Spain, England, Holland, all of them, France, all of them will stop kicking each other long enough to jump on us. Think about this. And here comes a bunch of folks, Mr. Toussaint Louverture, Mr. Jean-Jacques Dessalines, and of course Mr. Rigaud and Mr. Henri Christophe, and these folks who, with no knowledge outside, decided enough is enough. And they did such a job that today in St. Cyr, at West Point, and in Sandhurst, the Haitian Revolution, the tactics of Toussaint Louverture are required reading because everybody admits that Haiti invented modern guerrilla warfare. But if my grandma used to have to know them things. So they had to study these tactics. It's interesting, and the last person they studied before that was another black man, Hannibal. But that's why they can't be honest about it. But look at the situation now. You were there in 1792, and you're surrounded by a hostile world. The last thing these people want is that your revolution should become successful. Because to the extent that the Haitian Revolution becomes successful, it is a threat to slavocracy all over the world. No wonder they said it was a shot heard around the world 4 times. With the Haitian Revolutions, no slave master could sleep comfortably in his bed. No matter where he was. And we know this by looking at the plantation records, as I have done in the South, etc., etc. Go in, those of you who come from the island, those of you who come from the little country towns and places in the South, go down to the courthouses and go and get them ledger books out. They're there. Because up until recently, you know, everything was kept in them ledgers, like them books that when you buy stuff on time. And everything, every 10 years they got, and you look in the period between 1792 and 1834, and all you see is deposition after deposition after deposition, where some slave master is coming into town or to the county courthouse deponing that what he had to do was to take his gun out from under his pillow and kill some slave in his bedroom. Don't take my word for it. As you know, I spent 40 years. Go look, check it out. And when you tie this in with what was going on at the time, you begin to understand clearly why what was happening, and it should also teach us, I would think, that if we look at the parallels between then and now, the only thing that's changed is the name. The only thing that's changed is the name. Because Thomas Jefferson, when asked by his then Secretary of State, Aaron Burr, before he became, quote-unquote, a traitor, when asked, what should the position of the United States of America be vis-a-vis this uprising in Haiti? And Slick Tom, that's why they call him Shifty-Eyed Tom, because he couldn't look nobody in the eye. Shifty-Eyed Tom says, no problem. If the niggers seem to be winning, that's a quote, if the niggers seem to be winning, then we'll support the frogs. You know who the frogs were, the French. If the frogs look as though they're winning, then we support the niggers, because what we want and expect is at a certain point, when both sides get to be weak enough, then we can move in and take the whole island. It must fall into our laps. Skip ahead 20 years, we find John Quincy Adams as Secretary of State making a similar statement about Cuba. So Castro didn't start that, y'all. Don't buy that garbage. And what Mr. Adams said clearly, he says, Cuba is like a ripe apple on a tree. It must obey the laws of gravity. And when it falls, it has to fall in whose hands? Ours. Let us offer Spain $15 million for Cuba. Why $15 million? Because that was the same amount of money that they paid Napoleon for the Louisiana Territory. They don't tell you that. Haiti created 7 states in this country. Yes, our brothers and sisters in Haiti created all of the Louisiana Territory, which covered what is now 7 states, all the way from the Gulf of Mexico. It wasn't just Louisiana. The territory stretched from the Gulf of Mexico all the way to the St. Lawrence River in Canada. That would mean Nebraska, Idaho, North Dakota, you name it. Okay? All of that was part of the Louisiana Territory. Now, the reason that $15 million was offered to Cuba, for Cuba was because that is what was paid for the Louisiana Territory to France. It went, if you will, for 6 cents an acre. A total of $15 million. Now, why was Napoleon or France forced to sell the land? Because the original plan had been to use Haiti as the jumping off point to reconquer the North American mainland for France. That was the original plan. Unfortunately, our brothers and sisters had a different idea. In order to understand that, you must understand that at that point, Haiti was the richest possession that France had. It was the richest territory in the Caribbean. It supported 95% of all the French government expenses, plus millions left over for profits in pocket. And it was all coming out of whose sweat? Yours and mine. Now, when the Haitians decided that we ain't going to be slaves no more, you had a big problem. Napoleon sends his brother-in-law, Leclerc, great outstanding man. They kicked his butt. He wrote back a lie to his brother-in-law. Well, you see, I ain't having no problem with the niggers, but these mosquitoes, we getting the fever. Yeah. The fever they was getting was coming out of the barrel of them guns. All right? Now, ultimately, they lost. France, in other words, that war completely depleted the French treasury, thereby forcing Napoleon to sell the Louisiana Territory. Forget about his invasion plans now, his grandiose plans. He now has to sell it in order to keep France from going bankrupt. Now, once again, let's look at, here we are, we done won a war, And we's nice people. And Mr. Toussaint Louverture says, I don't want to be free. We just want y'all to not own us as slaves, and we want to be connected with France. We'll be a part of France Outre-mer. And the French said, yeah, that's cool. Let's get on this here boat, and we're going to go out and discuss this. Yeah, took his boys and held them as hostage. You all know what happened to Toussaint Louverture, right? He died in that horrible thing, or the Chateau d'If out there on that same place where Dumas got Edmond Dantès of the Count of Monte Cristo. And that was a thinly veiled takeoff on this thing. So here you watch again. After having beaten these people in the field, you turn around and say, y'all come on in and have some fungi. Yeah, little fried plantain there, some collard greens. Yeah, ham hocks there, all them good things because we don't want to fight. The hostility of the United States of America, I think, can no more be demonstrated than the fact that it took this country 70 years from 1803 to the Civil War to recognize Haiti as an independent country. And the only reason that your great friend and our wonderful benefactor, what's his name, Mas Lincoln, did it then was because he called in Mr. Frederick Douglass to see the links and several black people. It's about 1863. And he said to Mr. Douglass, I would like you to convince your people to get up and leave here. Now, he wasn't talking about Frederick Douglass folks that were still under the gun in slavery. He was talking about the ones that was quasi-free. Oh, thank you so much. I don't know, some of you may be familiar with this, but if you ain't, now, what was Mr. Lincoln's reason for this? He told Frederick Douglass and several other people involved, Alexander Crummell, he says, I have gone to Congress, and Congress has given me, they have appropriated several $100,000 for me to use to settle you black folks somewhere else. We figured we might get some land for you in Nicaragua. That's where he was, Nicaragua. And maybe somewhere in the Caribbean, because it's kind of far to send you back to Africa. And if you will go back and convince your folks to come, I will then take this money and get this land and send you out with something to help you until you get settled down there. Douglass says, why should we do that? And our great friend Mas Lincoln said, why? He says, well, it's obvious to me why. Go anywhere you will as a black in this country, go where you are treated the best and you are still hated. That's Master Lincoln, the good guy. Go where you will in this country, where you're treated the best, and you're still hated. And whenever any two people live together side by side on the same land mass, one of them must rule. And since I'm white, I'm in favor of white rule. That's a quote. Since I'm white, I'm in favor of white rule. And then went on to say, because if you and your people wasn't here, we wouldn't be killing each other. That's a quote. You think of this. In other words, what we did, we sold ourselves into slavery, we stacked ourselves like cordwood into these slave ships, tied ourselves up, and brought ourselves over here to inconvenience them, to force them to fight over. If you were not here, we would not be fighting each other. Of course, most of the books on Master Lincoln don't show that, but as my grandma used to have to say, you have to know them things. You got to learn to look and look beyond where you are. So now, what are we saying? We're saying that from the get-go, it was never intended by white people for our brothers and sisters in Haiti to have any peace. Because once the Haitian Revolution became a success, it rang, as Thomas Jefferson said, a fire bell in the night, all over the Slavocracy. Within 10 years after that, as Dr. Simmons will tell you, there was uprisings all over the place. Jamaica, the Maroons, Georgia, Dismal Swamp, South Carolina. You can't hide them all. Only now are we beginning to uncover a whole lot of the stuff that was done. But the point I'm trying to make to you is this consistent animosity and hatred for Haiti purely based on the fact that here was some African people that kicked their butts. And they ain't never going to forget. Right? The horror with us is that we tend to say, oh, that's all right. Now, the next chance they got at Haiti, of course, was just prior to World War I. Another great liberal, Mr. Woodrow Wilson, decided, I think the Germans mean to occupy Haiti. I think the Germans mean to occupy Haiti. His word, not mine. And he held a cabinet meeting as to what course of action should be taken. A gentleman, and I hate to do this to you, I hate to keep punching balloons in folks as heroes. The gentleman who represented the Navy at those conferences was a gentleman by the name of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who was the Assistant Secretary of the Navy. I'm sorry, excuse me. And Franklin says, there's no doubt in my mind that what we need to do is to go and take it away from them niggers. We should not wait for the Krauts, meaning the Germans, to come. As you are aware, I'm sure, so said, so done. 1915, the United States of America, or the United States of Bastards, if you will, once again jumps on poor Haiti. The Marines, who are all crackers, between 1915 and 1934, when they were forced to take the Marines out of Haiti, it was documented over 350 Haitians were lynched. 300 is counted lynched by U.S. Marines. The Haitian banks were taken over by the United States of America. The Haitian post office was taken over and run by the United States of America. Haitian foreign policy, to the extent it was taken over and run by the United States of America. The U.S. dollar became equal with Haitian currency as legal tender. For almost 20 years. Now then, when finally, in the time of the Great Depression, where they had to go because they could no longer stomach it anymore, they left in Haiti their own flunkies. You call them Uncle Tom, Aunt Thomasina, whoever the hell it is. From that day until today, Haiti has had no peace, no rest. We need to ask ourselves, how does a country that was one of the richest garden spots on the earth. Same climate, same people, now cannot pay their bills. Then while we were asking, if you think that what I'm saying is crazy, you're all aware that your great and glorious leader, Mr. Washed Out Bush, them folks are strange, starts up there and tell the Coast Guard to get out there in international waters and get on Haitian boats and turn them around and land them back in Haiti. So the United States of America, by that fact, has finally admitted what most of us from the South and the Caribbean has long known. The Caribbean now is indeed a United States lake. I haven't heard the UN say a damn word about this. All right? I haven't heard any of our so-called black political leaders open their mouths about this. Mr. Rangel, your congressman, went down to Haiti and talked about certain things, but I don't think he knows the history either. Now, what the hell prevents us from hiring people who can tell him these things? I will tell him to get Professor Simmons. I will tell him to get anybody, Minister Brown. Nothing. Nobody, except groups like this, are calling for meetings in our community. And one of the most tragic things is I find out as I go into places in and out of Brooklyn and try to do what little I can to raise consciousness. Oh, God. The F do I care about them? They ain't got nothing to do with me. I'm worried about how I'm going to get my next meal or how I'm going to get my next crack smoke. Children, we have some serious work to do. And we have to start with us. Because too often the enemy is us and them. At one time, I thought that we had reached a stage with all of this material and stuff that's coming out. I thought that we were getting to a place where the need to learn, the intellectual curiosity, the desire to know was on the upswing. But it doesn't seem to have gotten as far as I would have liked it to have gotten. Our values are still screwed up. And I don't mean on an individual level. I mean that our values are still screwed up. It took us 2 days last week to raise $2,000 for something that is a very important part of the heritage of every man, woman, and child in this room. I don't care where your roots started out from. Those sea islands, that language, that culture leads right straight back to West Africa, to the islands, everywhere. It's very important. $2,000. It beats a blank. I'm not knocking it. If I put 1,000 of my people in a room and I sell lotto tickets at $1 a piece, well, y'all tell me if I'm lying. I sell lotto tickets at $1 a piece. You'll raise 3 times that much out of 1,000 people. Yes or no? So the question then becomes priorities. And again, being programmed to think we can't do anything for ourselves. I am a minority. What do you mean a minority? We don't even know how many of us there are here. This is something I keep coming back to all the time. We need to start some kind of informal census as a people to begin to get some idea of how many of us there are here. We don't know. Yeah, they don't know either, but we need to know. Yes or no? We need to know. How can we make long-term planning or protection if we don't have no idea of how many people we hope we're planning for? I can tell you from where I live in Brooklyn, on any given day, I must pass on the streets at least 3,000 so-called undocumented brothers and sisters. But they're human beings, right? They sleep, they eat, most of them work, have jobs, right? So whatever their damn problem is, that's got nothing to do with us. We need to know who these brothers and sisters are. What skills that they have we can use. You see? Nobody asked our ancestors for a green card, y'all. Then we ought to, hey, you set it in motion, let's hew to the line. Didn't need a green card to get on the slave ship? Why the hell should I need one now? But we have to, as my grandma said, have to know them things. We got to begin to think like a people. Don't take me behind claw. I was making calls all weekend, well, not just myself, trying to organize some kind of impromptu white paper, if that's the word. I preferred use the term black paper, but I was overruled. Of people that we need to get a petition out here to begin to let these people know how the majority of our people feel. We cannot afford to sit by and allow these people to have pregnant Haitian women drown in the sea and turn. We cannot do this. And the reason they are doing it is to show their contempt for you and me. And the reason they show the contempt, I would argue, is because too often we go along with the program. Sure, they're not going to like you, but that's not the issue. That's not the issue. We have had almost 8 months of this struggle around Dr. Leonard Jeffries Jr. And right now, if I ask the people in this room, what is the status of the case, there ain't 3 people in here that can tell me. Something's wrong. Something's wrong. Because we've been programmed that something happens and we light the spark. Go get all them MF. Boom, boom, boom. And then 2 or 3 days or weeks or month passes, and all of a sudden, well, it's party time now until the next crisis. Leonard who? You think them people don't notice about us? Y'all think they don't notice? They just sit back and wait. Sit back and wait. And then sneak something through to us. Now, I think I've lived long enough. I don't know how many more years I got, and it's not really important. But if you can't be useful, what good is it anyway? I said to a young man outside, well, what do you think should be done? You can quote me. My file down there, the FBI, is probably thick as this building anyway. But now I said, well, you know, it is my belief that we need to stop sacrificing a whole lot of good people needlessly and uselessly. You want to stop these people from desecrating this graveyard of our ancestors downtown? No problem. We have these skills. After all, we learn all these high-tech things when we want to go into the private sector. All right? What you do, you take some plastic and you put it up under the engine of the bulldozer. And you don't have to hurt the dude. Just wait until he comes down off the bulldozer to go for lunch and then blow it up by a remote control device. Do the same thing to the main contractor's car. And as soon as he gets out now, you blow that up. You can quote me. What the hell are they going to do to me? Put me in jail? We're already in jail. But this is precisely how they handle problems that gets in their way, huh? Unions in this country was built with bombings and dynamiting and whatnot, right? That's, you know, oh, you're violent. These are the most violent damn people on the face of God's earth. How can I be violent? I ain't got no guns. I don't know one black person that owns a munition plant. I don't know one black person that owns a Winchester factory or Remington. I don't know one. There might be some. I don't know one. But once again, when you allow people to do this to you, they change the dynamics around and get you thinking off on a long way. And once that happens, you're not going to see clearly. When they yell about us being violent, they know better. It turns out that over 80% of all them stores that was burned in L.A. was burned by their owners. For the insurance. Well, who's going to get blamed? Mose and Mosetta. Right? If you saw any of those TV sets, you saw white folks in Seattle was stealing and running all night TV sets, you watched the news, they didn't see none of that. Ain't no, there's not enough black people in Seattle, Washington, to shake a stick at. But they were looting there for 4 nights in a row. Who done it? Who done it? But we have been designated as the domestic villain of the peace. And we need to understand this about the nature of the society we live in. It is a society that always have to have enemies. It has always got to have somebody to kick in the butt, to bash somebody. Nothing is ever white folks' fault, you know. Teflon society. Yeah, nothing sticks. If something happens, you done it. If you look at the history of the legislation of narcotics in this country, you'll come up with some very strange things. What did I do with my glasses? Well, I guess I left them home. No, these ain't them. But I'll manage. Who made that funny remark? I heard you. They're talking about narcotics in 1860. You know, up until 1900, all of these things, these drugs were legal, you know. And then about 1900, they decided that they had to do something to tighten up on Mose and Mosetta. And they wanted to get a law passed, a national law. So the way they did that is they said, the most passionate support for legal prohibition of narcotics has been a fear of a given drug's effect on a specific minority. Now, don't y'all go to the floor, because I'm going to read you something that you ain't going to believe. But trust me, I ain't making it up. Certain drugs were dreaded because they seemed to undermine essential social restrictions, which kept these groups under control. Cocaine was supposed to enable blacks to withstand bullets which would kill a normal person. And stimulated sexual assault in them. This was written by a doctor, by the way, so I mean, right? Fear that smoking opium facilitated sexual contact between Chinese and white Americans was also a factor in its total prohibition. Chicanos in the Southwest were believed to be incited to violence from smoking marijuana. Only Chicanos, mind you. And y'all became invincible to them bullets. Heroin was linked in the 1920s with a turbulent age group, adolescents and reckless and promiscuous urban gangs. Alcohol was associated with immigrants crowding into large and corrupt cities. In each instance, use of a particular drug was attributed to an identifiable and threatening minority group. Teflon. The occasion for legal prohibition of drugs for non-medical purposes appears to come at a time of social crisis between the drug-linked group and the rest of white American society. At the turn of this century, when the battle for political control of freed blacks reached a peak, as shown by the extent of disenfranchisement, lynchings, and the success of segregation policies, cocaine, a drug that was popular among whites in the North as well as in the South, was associated with expression of black hostility towards whites. What has changed? What's changed? Only the name. Chinese and opium smoking became linked in the depressions of the late 19th century when Chinese were low-paid competitors for employment, and this connection intensified during the bitter discrimination shown Orientals in the first decade of this century. The attack on marijuana occurred in the 1930s when Chicanos became a distinct and visible unemployed minority. Heroin claimed to be an important factor in the crime wave which followed World War I, was implicated in the 1950s as part of the Russian communist conspiracy against the United States. I rest my case. As it was, then as it is. The stress is put on getting what they call the mules who are out there pushing it on the streets. But the mules, if you go to any of these guys that's pushing, or whoever's pushing this stuff out there and say, what do you think of the Medellin cartel? What do you think your answer would be? The who? What kind of medicine is that? Never heard of it. Haven't got the slightest idea between the concept of how does it get from wherever it's grown in Colombia or Turkey, where the hell, and on the planes, incidentally worked and run and scenarioed by the CIA, and then on and off, a lot of time on United States Air Force air bases, and then through by there all the way up to the street, right? Now, if I know this, why the hell don't they know this? So the issue obviously is not a war on drugs, is it? Never was. And if it were indeed true that we became impervious to bullets, now mind you, these ain't backwoods crackers that's talking this, you know. This is secretaries of state, secretaries of defense, but we have been programmed that these people are smart. At the same time, in the mid-1930s, the brilliant Colonel Charles Augustus Lindbergh, whose claim to fame was he sat in a plane for some hours and flew across the Atlantic and thereby becoming an instant hero, 1927, was given a colonelship immediately in the Army Air Force. Never heard a gun fired in anger. Man, these are the same folks that's always talking about how we don't know how to do nothing, and too often we buy it. So this great expert, not only that, he was an expert on biology, he was also an expert on anthropology and non-white people. Shortly after coming back from Germany, where Mr. Hitler had awarded him the Iron Cross, he was called to testify before the House Aviation Appropriations Committee to testify on the possible need for this country to start building more fighter planes, warplanes. And the brilliant Colonel Charles Lindbergh said, it is absolutely unnecessary for us to build any more warplanes because the Germans, ain't nobody white gonna start no war, and none of the non-white people know how to fly no planes, And the Japanese can't see in the dark. Oh, yes, documented. Japanese can't see in the dark. Orientals can't learn to fly planes. The end result of this, again, by people not learning. In Singapore, you had the British sitting up there in the middle of the night, and the Japanese are coming over, the Prince of Wales and the Repulse, the prime of the British fleet. Two things go down, boom, one went down the stack, and the rest of the time it just went around like that, something like $20 billion down the drain. The next time, the next one hit the Repulse, boom. And a guy sat up there, and the old man and I says, you know, and we were watching this, and we said, God, them bastards are good. I wonder who's flying those planes. It must be Germans. Must be Germans. Now, these are Japanese mark. Got the rise of the sun. It's got to be German, because Japanese can't see in the dark. So there they were sitting with all them big artillery guns pointing out to sea, out in the China Sea, because we got the jungle protecting us back here. There's no way in hell that nobody can come through that impenetrable journey. Even though them Japs is monkeys, they can't swing through them vines. Took the Japanese 7 days. 7 days. 7 days to come up the whole Malaysian peninsula. And here are these dudes with these big expensive guns pointing out the sea. Now, if you're a tourist, see, the guns will only swing about 45 degrees, right? The Japanese are coming back this here way. No swinging around, because the guns don't, do good. And finally, when the great English General Percival, when Mr. Yamashita said to him, I want your surrender, and he says, actually, chap, I can't surrender now. I'll have to consult with my government. That's what he said. I must, before I can surrender, actually, I need at least 3 hours to consult with my government, because if we don't do this, actually, this is something that we just can't do this. It's not heard of. And Yamashita smacked him across his face with the back of the hand and said, whap, surrender now, dog. Yes, sir, boss. Yes, sir, boss. You mean now or sooner? Now, the English ain't been back to Singapore yet. I mean, they might come in the morning, but they ain't been back there. They supposed to off the war. Last I heard, they was talking about the 5 dragons, Singapore, Korea, and all these other places. So the dynamics of the world has changed, children. Y'all understand where I'm coming from? It has changed. All we've got to do is understand the dynamics and act accordingly. Japan helped Korea and Singapore and Malaysia. That Hyundai car, whatnot, the Japanese financed it. All them little things you get coming in here from home, they financed that. They took them into Japan, they trained them in assembly line technique, and who's catching hell now? Sam. We've got to learn to think as a group. We've got all of this, thank you. We've got all of this human resource in the Caribbean and South America. Jamaica, we have bauxite. Suriname, Guyana, we have oil in Trinidad and all of these other places. And we do not reap one iota of benefit from them. We worked 10 years trying to get a carifta together. And every little island decided that I would prefer to be a big fish in a little pond than to work together for the good of oil. Oh. Last week I was looking at the Bajan Advocate, and I always turn, whenever I'm dealing things with my folks, I turn to the advertisement for food, grocery store. And I see they got a jar, a 8-ounce jar of Planters peanut butter, which is selling in Bridgetown for $8 Barbadian. 8 ounces of Planters peanut butter. In the meantime, in Virginia, Georgia, Florida, Louisiana, there's thousands of our folks that's planting, harvesting, and making peanut butter. The sister said to me earlier, and I promised to tie that in, well, I want to go to Africa and get back, where we run things. I have no problem with that. The only problem is that we're not running things in Africa either. The price for cocoa is set by Mr. Hershey in Pennsylvania. Price for cocoa beans. The price for bauxite, tungsten, diamonds, gold. The diamond market is controlled right down here, 47th Street. Thank you, sir. You all heard of a gentleman by the name of Oppenheimer, Mr. De Beers, Mr. Rothschild, working in conjunction with Mr. Cecil Rhodes. So what would happen if, perchance, in Azania, tomorrow, we get political control? We got the numbers, don't we? We got the numbers. 30 million of us against 5 million of them. That's right. So we got the numbers. If then we take over every office in the government, do we have control? Of course not. Of course not. Because if we leave the economic superstructure in the hands of the same people it's in now, he who pays the piper calls the tune. And what you're looking at is, in order for us even to move that down, we've got to work to tear down, however hard it may be, that whole outside structure. And in order for us to have any help at that, we've got to work together. Those of us that's in the Caribbean and South America and the South, we must understand how that works. Because as greedy as these people are, when it comes to power, baby, they put all that personal stuff down. What did Lincoln tell the Indians during the same time? The next day after he spoke to Frederick Douglass and them, he called in the Indian chiefs and said to them, you may be thinking that because we, your great white brothers, are fighting each other, that now would be the time for you to start something. Don't think about it. Because what we'll do, we'll stop fighting each other and go kick your butt and then pick up our fight and start over again. Is that clear? So then the concept then is to really understand this. And when I talk to many of my students, and I say to them in the first place, while you're talking about economic control, whatnot, go get books that shows geographical outlay. Get topographical geography. So you begin to understand where are the minerals of this world. Where are the resources of this world? What part of it? Ask ourselves the question, how can a country like Japan, which does not produce 1 teaspoonful of oil, how does it give a fit to all these Western powers? Now, the Western powers would love to cut the oil off, but they're now caught in a bind. They're now caught in a bind. Now, they're perfectly capable of cutting off their nose despite their faith. With all of the talk about not getting the Japanese in, they are busy running their manufacturing thing offshore. And most of the places where these runaway plants here are going is going into areas where most of the folks look like the people in here. That ought to also tell us something about what our job, or at least what we should begin to teach to our young people so they can begin to understand. It's not something, go out and get a job. Yes, you got to eat, but if you do not understand the interlocking workings of economics, you will be forever shoveling shit against the tide. It ain't about a BMW or one of these fancy things. I'll give you an African thing. Take Zaire, one of the most corrupt countries on the face of the earth. The way one gets status if one considers that one has some kind of input as a government official, one knows one has arrived when one has that big Mercedes 300, that big fancy one, $50,000. That's how you tell everybody else. You see, certain things we have in common all over the world, don't we? Yeah, flash and all that, right? So now you come and you got your Mercedes. There's no assembly plant for Mercedes nowhere in Zaire. There's nobody in Zaire who is trained to be a mechanic for Mercedes. There is not one Mercedes dealership in the whole country of Zaire. And Zaire is a huge country. You could practically put this whole country in it, and swallow it. You better go look at geography. And that's what the fear is about. So whenever one of those Mercedes break down, the top people, of course, have the Rolls Royce or the Bentleys. So Mr. Mercedes, Mr. Bentley factory back in Germany and in London have special people who don't do nothing but fly all over the world and places to keep these cars running. What's happening to the majority of our people in these countries? How are they faring? But we're yelling and screaming about the dictatorship in Haiti, and we should. But once again, we can't allow people to divert our attention from the overall picture. Now, why ain't nobody yelling and screaming about Mr. Mobutu? Because Mr. Mobutu is the friend of Mr. Bush, quote unquote. The last Petroleum Institute projection of the oil reserves in Trinidad projected that in 20 years, all of the oil will be gone. That's the projection. What do we do in Trinidad then? Can we farm? Huh? No. Because the soil takes at least 300 years to replenish itself. Just watch what go to an oil field and see what it does to the soil. What is our brothers and sisters then going to do then? Huh? We need to look at these things. Everywhere we look at the history, we see these people have played the games. In 1834, they put us in the British Caribbean, quote, they put us on apprenticeship for 4 years. And then during the 4 years, they go to Asia and they bring in Indians and Chinese and whoever else they could to put in as a buffer. Exploit everybody. Four years later, you are now, quote unquote, free. You know, sometime when I hear some of my sisters and brothers say, yeah, in my country, your country, hell. You own about as much of it as you do there. Let's stop lying to each other. The reason that 8 ounces of Planters peanut butter costs $8 damn is it ain't going into the pockets of the average Bajan. And the average Bajan ain't going to be able to afford the peanut butter, and you know that as well as I do. So if we don't find some way of understanding and putting these things in some kind of perspective. That is what they mean when they talk about common markets, world banks, International Monetary Fund. And to understand this in terms of the motherland, all you've got to do is look at who owes the money. My friend, who I taught with at City College, Dr. Katemi, I learned a lot from this brother. He's from Kenya. And this is going 20 years for, and I used to sit with him every time he would get these notes from Barclays. I assume most of you Caribbean brothers and sisters know Mr. Barclay, the banker, the Englishman. And Mr. Barclay is also connected with Nigeria. Mr. Barclay is connected in Uganda. Everywhere the British colonial system went. Now, the colonialists have gone. Is Mr. Barclay going back? Mr. Barclay is where? Right where he's been. Now, here you have Kenyans and Ugandans and Zairans and Angolans who theoretically are independent, but are paying off notes on land that was theirs that the European came and took. And Katemi said that he probably will be able, they will be paying off this note on their ancestral land until the year 2025 if they don't miss any more payments. And if you take that and put it all over Africa, we need to look at that. So I think we need to look at this. Because that's a reality. That's why what we do for the Penn schools and all those things, we don't have no choice. We don't have any choice. Because if somebody sitting in Hershey, Pennsylvania, can sit and make a decision and say, okay, well, I think them niggas out there in the cacao bean field is getting too much, so what we will do, we will not buy any more cocoa. That's the way to do that, you know. Yeah. We don't buy no cocoa beans. And then when they don't buy no cocoa beans, watch how they win both sides. That creates the shortage. So when you create the shortage of cocoa beans, what happens to chocolate? And what happens to Mr. Goodbar? Price goes up, right? When you bring the cocoa farmers down to their knees, then you open up the floodgates again. There is no shortage of diamonds in the world. The shortage is artificially created by Mr. De Beers, etc., etc. That is why the whole market is controlled between Southern Africa, Amsterdam, and West 47th Street. And if you go and you look at them people looking through them loops, 90%, 95 and 500% of them is wearing yarmulkes. Which means what? That there is a network there. They talk to the people in Amsterdam, who talks to the people, whatnot. In the meantime, the brothers who are digging in the mines, in the gold mines, in 6 months they are beaten and going back to the so-called homelands, and in 1 year they are dead. I would like to know what plans does the ANC have to correct that? And you don't knock what people done for good, but we have to begin to look beyond expedient things and make long-range plans. That's all I'm saying. But in order to do this, we have to try to understand something about basic economics. When you stop and think how much money, how much treasure that these people spent and the time and effort they went through to transport us here from Africa. And it was all worthwhile to them. What the hell y'all think that they was making in profit? Huh? What do you think they were making in profit? because it wasn't just us, they enslaved their own. That wasn't enough. They enslaved the Indian. That wasn't enough. Now you come down to the line of reckoning, and people who, for whatever reason, don't seem to understand the fundamentals of economics, our people, and the dude sits up and says, well, affirmative action, actually, that's a quota system, and it's really reverse discrimination. And actually, what we want here is a level playing field for everybody. And somehow simple-minded so-called economists, yeah, that's right, we ain't want nothing, actually, we just want a level playing field. I just ask a simple question, when the hell was the playing field ever level for us? 9th of this month, I will have been here 72 years. I ain't seen one yet. Might be around the corner, but I ain't know it. I can give you any number of examples of the other way. They always had affirmative action for white folks. Yeah. They always had quotas for black folks. They were known as zero quotas. One classic example, and I get off your butt. From the beginning of the iron horse railroads, starting out in 1830 in England, and in this country up to the late 1930s, over 100 years, the main methods of propelling engines were steam by coal. About the middle, and that meant that you had to have two people in the engine cab, the engineer and the fireman. Now, what was the fireman's job? Every time he opened that boiler door, 50,000 degrees Fahrenheit came out at him, boom. White folks' skin don't take to that kind of heat. So that job was reserved for Moes, right? And we consider that, if you were a fireman, man, Mr. Jones, the fireman, eating high on the hog. Big job. Put a lot of people through school with this. About 1935, they started experimenting with diesel fuel. By the time they had about a third of the rolling stock converted to diesel, the Brotherhood of Railway Workers, white, sat down with the railway owners, you can check me out on that, and made a deal and said, we don't want, this way said, we don't want no niggers as firemen anymore. We want you to fire them all. Well, we can't do that, but they worked out a deal that said that as each black fireman retired or quit or dropped dead, his job would be replaced by a white. Now, except he was no longer known as a fireman, because everything goes in now with the valves and hang. So they created a new title for what used to be the fireman. He's now an assistant engineer, because you had to have two people sitting looking down the track. So while the engineer is looking out of the left or right-hand side, the fireman, so it's a clean job. Within 10 years, there was not one person that looked like me that was sitting in the cab of an engineer. We worked like hell to take over the Pullman service. Very important job for us. 10,000 of our people worked as Pullman porters. When the so-called period of integration came around, when the smoke cleared away, guess who's making up the beds on them Pullmans now to get down? White folks. The cooks, white folks. The dining car waiters, and I just made a trip all the way out to California by train. I love trains. I'm scared of planes, you know. First, I don't need to go that fast. I allow time, and if God had intended for me to fly, he'd give me wings, and I ain't got none, so, you know, that's another story. But I took a trip all the way from here to San Francisco I never had my bed made up one time by anybody that looked like me. I never had food served to me by one time by anybody that looked like me. All the people running back and through with the mops and the broom did not look like me. They had a crew of about 20 people on this train. Check me out. Don't take my word for it. Where are those jobs? Affirmative action? Up until 1930s, everybody that stood as a doorman in front of one of these fancy apartment hotels, was somebody that looked like me. And then what they call a depression came along, what my folks call a panic came along. Because when white folks are having an economic depression, we were having a panic. And the black elevator operators, the black linen closet people, the black bellhops, the black cooks, the black waiters, they would say, hey, here you is, here's your hat, what's your hurry? Let the doorknob hit you in the back. We ain't got none of them jobs back either. Now, I'm not saying that one has to be a doorman reporter, but these are things I'm saying to you that if you lose your economic base, what do? Anybody here got any idea how much the average doorman in one of these fancy apartment houses take in at Christmas time? Tax free. Huh? It's nothing. I know a dude that collects $20,000 during the whole period. That's right. And he ain't even working in no fancy one. Chow women cleaning the offices, office buildings. Who used to have them jobs? Who got them now? But if you don't have a place to stand, you got no leverage. And if you got no leverage, you can't move anything. There was a time in the South and a place now we understood those things. We need to look at and understand the game to play. If you look at the history of immigration in this country, it'll tell you something, because just like what this man said about narcotics control, the same pattern followed with immigration. Everything was always done with the idea of keeping Mose and Mosetta under control. Let me show you how. Whenever there is an economic expansion in this country where more labor is needed, they lower the immigration laws, which allows them to bring in people from Northern Europe. And they now say specifically, we ain't want nobody from Trinidad and Caribbean, none of y'all, or Northern Europe. When they get in all of these people they want, then they change the law again. Now, what that means is those of us who are here that could use the access to those jobs to move up and get a better economic leverage on survival, you have now been locked out again. Now, it's asinine for us to assume that these Slavs and these Bohunks and these Russians and these Jews and all of them is going to sit there and say, yeah, I ought not be doing that to y'all because y'all been here all the time and y'all deserve it? Is that what's going to happen? Hell no. Dog, they don't like me. You're damn right they don't like us. We need to understand this. You go after it all. If you doubt my word, a couple of months ago in where I live in Brooklyn, there was a bunch of these Hasidim out there with signs saying, Negroes go back to Africa. Go back to Africa. You just got off the boat. Right? We've been here 500 years. But what this tells us is the mentality of white folks. The fact now, he will never say that to a wasp because he's white. But he feels that he can say anything to Mose and Mosetta, and that's quite all right because we ain't nobody. And too often we allow him to get ready. Kick his butt one time. Right? Go back to Africa. Who the hell are you to tell me to go anywhere? Right? But what we have been programmed to do, we watch each other. Yeah, I ain't gonna let that coconut get my job. Go home. What you monkey chasers doing you anyhow? You know the thing, right? And they come here for the same reason that people go anywhere, trying to get further and do a little better. I sat up in a restaurant on Nostrand Avenue some years back when they were taking up the trolley tracks out of the street. And as I walked up Nostrand Avenue, I found that I was listening to these people, and everybody out there was a work crew of about 50 people because they had to work at night, you know, get a section so that the thing could go down the next morning. And all these people were Sicilians. They asked me how I know I speak 5 languages, but don't tell nobody, I'll deny it. When I get to this restaurant, there's a lady in there I know, and there's a Jamaican gentleman comes in and he asks for a container of coffee to go. And this lady says, I ain't got no coffee. 2 big urns sitting up there full of coffee. The man says to her, but you got coffee in the urn. I ain't got none for you. Coming over here and taking my job. Now she working. So I said, Miss Mary, can I have a container of coffee? So she gave me the container of coffee. I handed it to the gentleman, and he says, nice, listen. So I said to her, why are you doing this to this man? I can't stand him. Them old West End. What do you mean, kid? You don't know who the hell your ma and your pa is. These people put you wherever you want to go. I mean, you can't stand them. See out there in the streets, there's a street full of Sicilians. Just got off the boat. Can't speak, couldn't even say to you good morning in English. She didn't see them. They bring them in here. Did you know that? They bring them in by the thousands. If they have a construction job, bring them in, the immigration turn their back, they get them in, they get the money, they do job, and they go back home. We don't see that because we've been programmed to watch each other. Now, this brings me to my last thing. I see that Dr. Leonard Jeffries Jr. or something is back there. Is you here? You here? Oh, you know, he's not here officially. Thank you. We have in front of us a serious problem. We have a brother that's been kicked in the teeth and right whatnot for almost a year now for telling the truth. And it's very interesting that from what I understand before, one of the things that was said was that the chancellor let it be known that Dr. Jeffries there was no charges being brought against Dr. Jeffries because he ain't done nothing. Well, we knew that, but that's not the way it goes. But I find it very interesting that as soon as they tried to ice the man, all of a sudden he can't buy a headline in the white press. And we need to turn this around. Because once again, these folks expect us to go to sleep, and we always accommodate them. And then wake up one morning and say, God damn, they done this again. They're going to keep doing it. That's what they do. That is what they do. That is the culture. And that's why when I put that to you earlier, about 1,200 cadets sitting up in a military academy, feeling threatened by one black man, what do you think we're dealing with here? Huh? What do you think we're dealing with here? And them backwoods where I grew up, when them old people used to tell, my uncle used to say, you see a crack out there, you watch him. Learn your survival things. If you're talking to him and you see him grab his balls, hit him. Or if you ain't got nothing to hit him with, run. Because there's something about these folks before they go to war. These Anglos said they always like they want to feel secure that their manhood or whatever's about them. So they usually check first. Now after he checks, oh, I'm dead serious about this, children. After he checks, he'll cold cock you and knock you into the middle of next week. So when you see him reaching, don't wait. Even if y'all just talking about the weather, ice him then. Old folks taught me that back then, right? And he used to say, and whenever a cracker gets ready to lie, he starts scratching his behind. Yeah. So that's how my grand uncle always knew when Lyndon Johnson was lying, because Lyndon Johnson was one of them crude Texas crackers. And he says, no, we're going to get out of Vietnam. And the guy says, hell, you can. All right, now, just for summation, I've covered quite a bit of ground, and I did this in this manner because I promised this beautiful lady back there in the back to try to put some of these things in perspective. We need to be on top of Mr. Bush and all these people, at least find a position to ask you what right gives you the authority to go out in the Coast Guard on the high seas and take people and quote unquote turn them around. They have a right to be. That's number one. The other thing we need to understand, I find it also interesting because once again they're linking Haiti and Cuba, right? The Cubans have been trying to get these people off Guantanamo Bay for the last 30 years. They refuse to leave. 100-year lease, $1 a year, option renewable at the United States will. Panama, there may be some folks that hear from there, same thing. If you think that they will get up that canal, don't hold your breath. So when we look at Zaire, when we look at all of these places, it would seem to me, whether we talk about Brazil or these places, and all of these places are places where we have cores of African people, all the way out into Australia and into the Marshall Islands. There's a classic documentary that came on the other day. There's something like around 30,000 Marshall Islanders who have been born deformed in the last 20 years. You know why? Yeah, from them nuclear tests. And the United States government said, we are willing to pay your government $50,000 for it all. If nothing else, my people, this should tell us, try to learn from the other person's bashing in the head. Not that you want to see that. Because if you don't, the next bashing is going to be ours. We're going to have to find some way of, in my view, of looking at the realities of what we're in. Economics is the key. Economics is the key. It is insane. Barbados was a very wealthy British Crown slave colony. The same climate you got in Virginia, you got in Barbados, you know, or Florida, Georgia. You can grow penders. You can grow penders in Barbados. You ain't got to import no penders. I'm sorry, peanuts, y'all. There's no reason for that. Climatically or soil-wise, there's no reason for that. The same kind of fruit that you can grow down the tropics, you get right there in Florida, where I was born, the same thing, you get the mangoes, coconuts, all right there. Why can't we work some kind of international, informal, if you will, rift? And what I'm suggesting, you know, is like going back. You know, Garvey was right, you know that, don't you? If we can use Penn and other places as a role model to begin to try to get this land, as I said the other night, we must begin to think large, to train young people to become agronomists and make them want to train them to become community lawyers. I'll just repeat the other night what I said because it bears repeating. I said this to our young lawyer the other night. What we sorely need, particularly in the South and in the islands, because them tourist people is grabbing up everything, you know. People who can go in and show people things on how one goes about incorporating a village, how one goes about incorporating a township, You take the average county in the South, particularly the deep part where I come from, where you may have a total of 3,000 white people and 20,000 black folks. In, say, 25 or 30 small all-black villages or communities. And where's the post office? In the white village. Right? Where's the county commissioner's office? In the white village. Tax collector? In the white village. Why? Because one of the things that we have not been able to get over. Because one of the things that we have not been able to do with many of our young people, and I'm not blaming them, we have not been able to sit down and organize a strategy, the kind of things that we try to do here, to make them think about the land, to make them think about the importance of land. The dynamics of the South and the coastal South is changing in the same way the dynamics of the Caribbean is, you know. It's all becoming these few conglomerate people that have the, they hire just enough people to do the house cleaning and whatnot in the community. And you can't even go on the damn beach in your own country. Think about it. We need to understand zoning laws. And that's what things people like you can do. These are not hard things to do, but you see, the biggest thing is to set the trigger off to start people to thinking about these. Once you do it, people say, why didn't I think of that before? How many times has that happened to you? But somebody has to set the spark. Because we are all creatures of habit. Somebody has to set the spark. If we don't do this, within 10 years, in my view, that's what we got, about 10 years, it may be too late. And I don't want to sound like a prophet of gloom and doom, but remember, I've spent 40 years, the last 40 years of my life, going down, doing research and writing down in these areas and talking to people. And of course, each time I go, more and more of the old people are gone. And as more and more of the old people die, the links with the culture dies. And one of the things, and I've taped, as I said, I've got over 6,000 hours of tape with these people, and the one thing that keep coming back over and over is how come they come here and they sell the land and they ain't even asked nobody what the land was, come here, get off the bus or the train, go to the courthouse, sell it, and them crackers are waiting there, you know, give you whatever you want, hail, Philly, and gone. Never see it no more. Now, once again, the same thing happens. See, that's the rural Southern version of what happens when the porters' jobs and the waiters and all those things go, because what happens there is those jobs, these communities, are largely self-sufficient. Is that clear? You've got corporations like Deltona, Deltona Corporation, and I don't know how many of y'all come from the coastal South, but if you start from Tidewater, Virginia, all the way down to Key West, these people have about 20 communities of land that used to be, a lot of it used to be ours, you know, and they build a completely contained city. Everything comes out of there. They don't even hire housekeepers from surrounding communities. They use nothing but the facilities. At the end, we are further back. Disney World wiped out about 65% of all the black cattle ranches in my home state of Florida. Now, I would argue that probably most of y'all didn't even know that Florida was a cattle ranching state. But Florida was the second largest cattle ranch in the world. And most of the cowboys and ranchers there were us. So here comes the state works, and Disney sits smack dab on the middle of about 30 former cattle ranches. And they've got, if you go down there, God knows how many thousand acres in reserve. A whole lot of that land used to belong to people like the folks sitting right here in this room. Will we ever see it again, Brother Jones? Will we ever see it again? No. So it would seem we need to begin to, if we're going to talk about education, then we need to look at education for survival, the history for survival. We need to start thinking about what are natural resources, what are they about. If you don't have no access to the International Monetary Fund, you don't get nothing started. And I would just end by making this point, if you think what I'm saying don't make sense. I will ask any of you in here who is over 21 years of age, just as a experiment. Tomorrow or the next time you got some extra time, walk into your local bank, there you have an account, if you have one, and go into your loan office and says, my name is George or Georgette X, and I have done this market research out here on this building, and I think this is in this street, and this is a great spot for a kind of business that I've been thinking about. I've done my research, and I know it will work, and what I need from you is $10,000 seed money. And y'all come back at the next meeting and just tell these folks if you get it. But I will just give you in advance, the answer will be, oh no, we're not lending any money this time, right? After he's turned you down or she's turned you down, walk outside, come back again, go to the same loan officer. You know, I changed my mind. I agree with you. The idea of having a business around here doesn't fit. So you know what I'd like to do? I'd like to buy a Cadillac or BMW. How much do you need? Try me. You walk out. Why? Because letting you have money to buy a damn car works to their economic benefit. Letting you have money or spending you money to start some kind of a business that might ultimately end up putting other jobs and making other black folks independent, that is not part of their priorities. And I've had students, as you know, I do a lot of coaching on the outside, and about 3 years ago, Brooklyn College had a special seminar where they got 6 credits for it, and black students were not told about it. I don't know why. It was an oversight, right? But a very smart young lady discovered it and went to the dean. He said, oh, the reason you didn't know about it because there's no more money in the budget, to get somebody to teach it. So she called me and says, would you be willing to teach this course because it'll help, these are mostly working women. I said, of course I will, no problem. I said, all I have to do is whether or not they will accept the fact that I am connected with a state university. So she went back and told the guy, and the guy had me to come in, and he was very upset. I don't understand why you want to do this. I don't understand why you want to do this. Couldn't you use your time better going on a vacation? I said, yeah, I could do a lot of things, but this is what I'm going to do. All right? We ended up, now these were all economics majors. So we ended up doing a special thing, and then I decided to work on this special thing, was to do a thing with them on basic economics, and all of these were seniors. Not one of those young people had the slightest idea about how to put together a domestic budget. Is that clear what I'm saying? They could tell you the price, the downturn, the Wall Street average, this and that and the other, but they did not understand even how to go about putting together a budget. Because nobody went dumb. Nobody had ever taught them. So we sat down and worked simple things, but this is the kind of miseducation that these institutions will teach. And this is another reason why, and I sum up, and we got to understand, this is why the Leonard Jeffersons and all these other people, the Dr. Simmons and people, that's why we're a threat. I wouldn't even go to say me. Because the assumption is that we will sleep unless somebody wakes us up. That we are ready, too willing, too often, to settle for something that we don't even want to think too much about. I didn't even deal with the questions of narcotics only in a biasing way, simply because I felt that in view of what the beautiful lady in the back talked to me about, and it was in the concept of our understanding of economics and our position in it worldwide. And when you put that together with the numbers we have and the brain power we have, the system is not going to roll over and play dead for us. I thank y'all. In this show, I ain't running. I done my thing.
And you alluded to returning back to Africa with all the problems, that are in Africa. I would just like to ask you, what is the solution? I mean, and I know there's not an easy one, but, some of us feel that, and you stated quite correctly that don't care where you go, white folks do not want you here in the United States, and I accept that wholeheartedly. So what is wrong with, although there's a lot of problems in the motherland, going there, tilling the land, if you're able to, this is my dream, I don't know if it's my desire to be very honest with you, but it certainly is a dream of mine, that we can prepare ourselves, because I don't see how we can on this planet, on this side of, in the United States, ever find any peace. So I just, like to think that is an attorney. We were brought here forcefully. The God, I'm a believer in God, and he did not put me here. So I don't think I belong here.
Now, what's your question, beautiful lady?
My question is what is wrong with you? I didn't understand what you were speaking to when you talked about returning to Africa. You said that there's so many problems there.
No, that's not, no.
Or maybe I misunderstood it.
What I said clearly is, before we make any decision, my theme, we have to understand the nature of what we're about. All right? And I'm also describing to you that if everybody in this room tomorrow, and Dr. Jefferson spent a lot more time on the mother, and I'm not, God knows I love the motherland, but we must do these things with our eyes open, is what I'm saying. There is no panacea. You understand what I'm saying to you? You've got the same economic problem in Africa that we have in Barbados, that we have in Guyana, that we have in Suriname, that we have in the Sea Islands, that we have here. Let me just give you a couple of things since you asked the question. I didn't want to go into it. This is what happened. Sir? All right. Are you ready? And the nature of the people. When Guinea decided that it did not want to remain a part of what the French used to call France Outre-mer. I don't know how you can have overseas France in Africa. And the Ghanaians took a vote, says they voted for independence. Here's what the French did. They tore down every building. They took the lumber that was no good, they piled it up and burned it. They took the rusty nails and they brought them back. Dr. Jefferson said they took everything back. The Portuguese did exactly the same thing in Angola. All right? Left, now, you left, not in a minute, but you still left. When they went, they still was left with deeds to the land.